Hey everyone, welcome back to the Forbes family farm. It's fall and we're getting some blustery days, and now it's finally kind of the cool of the evening and the wind finally died down enough to take a video here. We're taking a little detour in our seed to plate series and talking about a crop that's not one of our garden crops. Instead, it's the one crop that we grow for meat, and that's our pastured poultry. And so as I zoom out a little here, what you see is one of our shelters with our Freedom Rangers, which is a breed of kind of a heritage breed, slower growth breed that's commonly raised for meat production. It's a red colored or sometimes a tricolored bird that matures in 10 to 12 weeks. And these chickens are about 11 weeks, so they're right at maturity, about ready to harvest. We'll probably harvest them in the next week or so. And you can see a little bit about just how we raise them. This shelter offers each bird about 1.5 to 2.5 square feet of fresh grass per day per bird, and that's kind of the equation that we always go for, the math that we always go for when we're stocking our shelters and building our shelters. And we move this shelter every day. That's how we ensure the birds are on fresh grass every day. And this is a model of what we call pasture raised poultry. So we do provide a feed supplement, but primarily what the birds are eating is the bugs and the plants that are growing right in front of them on the ground. And so they eat the grasses, really all of the greens that are growing around them, as well as the bugs that are growing amongst all the plants. And so in the process, they scratch a lot, and they trample and move around a lot. And so a lot of the grass and the plants that are growing under them get trampled really well, which is good and beneficial for the plants. It kind of spurs them to regrow. And then they're dropping their manure, which is really good nutrients for the pasture as well. And so I'll move just a little bit here, and you'll be able to see kind of what that effect looks like as we look back in recent days of where the shelter has been. You can see the difference in terms of what the grass looks like and the way in which they really trample the grass and drop their manure, which is good fertility. And as we get into next season, these stretches where we move the chickens will really rebound well and grow well, and the soil will benefit from it as well. Also behind me, what you see is our other chicken shelter. That's our mobile chicken coop. And that's where we keep our egg layers. So we raise them on pasture as well. It's just a little bit of a different model, more of a free range model, where the chickens have a larger space that's enclosed by electric netting, where they are able to get out of the coop and move around and scratch and dust bathe and do a little bit more of what mature chickens need when they reach a full age of egg laying, which is usually at least several months in age. And then we'll keep those egg layers as long as they're productive, depending on the breed. Sometimes we've got some 3 and 4 year old chickens in there that are still very productive egg layers. That's also where our dogs are up there, our livestock guardian dogs. We always keep them close to that coop. These shelters that we have our meat birds in are a little bit more resilient to predator pressure, but with those ones being a little bit more in the open, it's nice to have the dogs there to deter any predators. And so that's a little bit about how we raise chickens, and again the pasture raised model that we use. And part of the reason that we have them in this specific area of pasture is you can see the greenhouse behind me. This is all areas where we hope to in the near future be establishing some of this hayfield, small portions of it, as garden beds. And the reason why is because this side of our property gets a lot more sun, and it would be really beneficial for us to have some crops growing in a more sunny area. And so that's part of why we have the chickens here, to start preparing the soil and building the soil to be growing vegetables in the future. And so again, we'll take you inside from here and show you a little bit about how we like to use chickens in the kitchen, and mainly how we prepare them and get them ready to prepare regardless of how we're going to cook them. There's some basic techniques to know to be able to part the chicken and make it something that you can use in a variety of ways. So thanks again. We'll see you in the kitchen.
Welcome everyone to the Forbes Family Farm. We got chickens right here. Oh, you hear them scratching? That's what I like to do. I mean, these chickens have lots of hair and stuff. I mean, they know how to scratch, I'm sure. So here we can see the little two roosters. Hey, don't. And then a horse are always take care of them, right there?
So welcome to the kitchen, and as we were describing outside and the ways that we raise our chickens, one of our favorite things is then to take it to the kitchen and put it to use and make great dishes. And one of the tricks when we're working with whole chickens is figuring out how we can use it, and a lot of that oftentimes boils down to parting the chicken out. A lot of recipes will call for just chicken breasts or chicken thighs or chicken legs and so forth, and being able to part the chicken is such a critical first skill to know, to be able to prepare different types of recipes and kind of mix up what you're doing so you're not always just doing a whole roast chicken. And then knowing how to part a chicken is also useful after you've cooked it. If you have roasted it as a whole chicken, then being able to part it out well so that you can put it on the plate and have it cut well where the pieces of meat all stand alone and hold together well. So we're going to walk you through right now how to part a raw chicken into 8 parts, and we'll show an angle where you can see my hands working, and hopefully if it's something that you've never tried before, it's enough to get you started and get you comfortable with parting chickens yourself. All right, so here we are with our raw chicken, and this is one of our kind of medium-sized chickens. One of the things when you're raising your own chickens is we get a more range of sizes. We get all the way from 2.5 pounds up to sometimes 5-pound chickens, and so the size can vary quite a bit, but the process is the same. A lot of times commercially raised chickens, they really aim for standardization, and so you don't see as much variability in size when you're buying from a store. But whether you've raised it yourself or you've purchased from a store, the process can be the same. And so the first thing that we're going to do when we're parting the chicken is we're going to separate the thigh and leg from the rest of the body. And so the first easy step to do with that is to kind of pull and create a little bit of tension in the skin, just enough where you can use a sharp knife to just pierce through the skin, and then pull hard to actually start to separate the hip joint, which is where the thigh meat connects in with the rest of the chicken. And so then you can identify by moving that thigh just a little bit where the joint is, and then taking your knife and cutting as close as you can in on the body and cutting right through that joint between the thigh and the hip. And then just cutting the skin and trying to preserve as much skin as we can with the thigh. So right here we have the leg and thigh of the chicken together. And so then we are separating the thigh from the leg by similarly identifying where the joint is between the two. And once you've identified it, simply taking, again, a sharp knife is really critical in this process, taking the knife and cutting right through the joint, preserving an even amount of meat between the leg and the thigh. And once they are separated, we have a nice thigh with the skin on, and the leg, or drumstick as some people refer to it. Now you can leave the leg just like this, but there's another way, one more step you can take with the leg, and sometimes people will refer to it as making it a culinary leg or a chef's cut. And what you do with that, you can use a regular chef's knife for it, or you can use a chopping knife if you have one available. But we're actually going to cut the leg just to get the knuckle off. And I'll show you why, for some preparations, that's useful to do. And so the easiest thing to do is set your knife against the leg, and then in one motion to chop through, and then cutting the tendons. Oftentimes you have to cut through just a little bit. And then you have the leg cut in a chef style. And the reason that you may want to do this is sometimes when you're braising, or if you're cooking the leg in a way where you want to be able to rotate it different directions to cook it evenly, cooking it in this, or cutting it in this manner, balances the leg so that it'll stand up a little bit more easily on its own this way, and you're taking off some of that top weight. So even once it's cooked, especially once it's cooked, it'll stand up just like that, which makes a really nice presentation when you put it on a plate. So those are 2 of our 8 pieces cut, the thigh and the leg. And then on the same side, we will cut the wing. And so the wing, once again, you're identifying the joint of the shoulder where the wing is connecting in with the body of the bird. And then cutting, I like to cut kind of taking it from the inside and cutting up toward the top. And as you're doing that, one of the tricks is not cutting into the breast, but preserving as much meat as you can on the wing. The wing does not have a lot of meat in and of itself. And so the more meat you can preserve, especially right up here at the shoulder, the more you're getting out of that wing. And so, again, I had the wing folded back. Sometimes it will not be folded back, depending on how it's packaged, but that's one way that you can cut the wing. And then finally, cutting the breast. And the breast, you can do a couple of ways. The way that I find easiest is to find that middle breastbone right down the middle of the bird and begin by cutting right down along that breastbone and allowing, again, you really need a sharp knife for this, but just cutting right along the contour of the breastbone, identifying where this bone that comes right across the breast right here is, and cutting just along that, and then continuing that cut right along the breast of the breastbones of the bird until you have the breast cut with the skin on and the tender as part of the breast. You can actually cut sometimes just straight down, and you cut right through the wishbone, and then you can cut through the carcass and keep those bones as part of the breast. For most preparations though, that we do at least, it's a little bit easier just to have a boneless breast, and cutting it just like that is the best way to get as much meat as possible while leaving the skin on and not having any waste. And so then we just go through the same motion again on the other side, but as you can see, we have one side where we have our 4 pieces: breast, wing, thigh, and leg, clean cut from the carcass of the bird. And then when we do that on the other side, we will have 8 pieces with as little waste as possible. We don't want any meat that we're leaving on. And then we always save our carcass and use the carcass in stock. It's a great way to just ensure that we're getting the most that we can out of the animal that we've raised and that we're not having any waste with it. So there's an introduction. Again, you just follow the same process on the other side of the bird to cut first the leg and thigh, separating the two, and then cutting the wing off, and finally the breast. And that's the way you get 8-piece chicken.